There are new refrigerants that are being introduced. We already have our hands on the equipment. New products are being released every day. They're flammable, but they're not highly flammable. They're low flammability compared to other refrigerants that are out there. And moving forward, we've got different companies going with different refrigerants. And I've done other videos that I'll put a link to in the description of this video that you can watch that compare the two and go through some of the ins and outs of this. In this video, I want to cover 5 big problems that I see with these refrigerants that I think you need to know before you purchase equipment with these refrigerants in them. Some of these may play a big role on your next purchase. So let's dive into it. Number 1 is the misinformation that we're seeing out there. These new refrigerants have opened the door to a lot of misinformation out there. There's things being thrown around. One of those being that there's propane in these refrigerants. I did a video basically debunking this myth. There is no propane in either one of these refrigerants. Propane in itself is a refrigerant. If you were to go buy an RV, like a travel trailer today, chances are that travel trailer could have propane as a refrigerant in the refrigerator itself. We also see R290, which is essentially a clean version of propane, and it is a refrigerant widely used in our country. It's obviously a very flammable refrigerant because we've all cooked a steak or two with propane, and chances are if you were to go to a local pub today, the beer cooler behind that bar could have R290 in it. But back to A2L refrigerants, there's all kinds of misinformation being thrown around. There's a lot of confusion. And if you stay tuned to our channel, our YouTube channel, make sure you're subscribed to it, because that's one of the things we've kind of been tasked with, setting the record straight in a lot of cases when it comes to these refrigerants and getting a lot of that misinformation straightened out. So that is the first biggest problem. Number 2 is a lot of the codes that are revolving around these new refrigerants are not very clear. They are being changed periodically, and some of them are vague, and I think they're vague on purpose. I've sat through classes on these new refrigerants where they were vague on purpose. I feel like a lot of the rules being made are so that people are kind of covering themselves. So if there were to be a problem, they could say, well, I told you, I made that rule and you broke it. But some of these rules and codes and so on are unreasonable, in my opinion. That if we were to use a little common sense here, we would know that they're unreasonable. Things like the storage and transport of these refrigerants, and then the overall use of these refrigerants. I think that some of the codes need to be made more clear when we're talking about the installation of the line sets and where it's okay for them to be located. A lot of unclear vagueness revolving around that. A lot of unclear things are being said about whether or not it's okay to even reuse line sets. And then the equipment itself, just a lot of things that are still kind of vague, and they need to get these things straightened out, in my opinion, and they need to spell it out so it's very clear, so folks know what the actual rules are, especially when we're talking about a new installation here. And that plays right into number 3, which is these changes keep happening. Some of the things we were told when these refrigerants first came out have been changed. We were told that, the cylinders would be this color, and we were told that recovery cylinders would have a red top, that they would all be painted red. And then they said that's not true. And then they said that the non-refillable cylinders that you purchase with the refrigerant in it, they're going to have to be turned back in. And then that was debunked. I guess there were lobbyists in Washington that pushed back on that. And, there's just a lot of ins and outs of things that are being changed constantly. And I think that's to be expected to a degree when you are talking about laws and different opinions and different folks in our industry having different objectives here, different motives in place. And sometimes when one side gets their way, the other side loses out, right? So there's going to be changes on that front. But some of these things that they keep changing are things that, in my opinion, they should have had figured out a long time ago. These debates that are being had, rules that are being changed, and they're figuring things out and pushing and debating and whatever, that should have all been straightened out a long time ago before the very first product was sold. You got to realize these refrigerants are not new. A lot of guys want to pretend like they are, but they're not. A2L refrigerants, specifically R32, has been used for decades overseas. Definitely years, if not decades. But even here in our country, they're not new. Some of these states, because even though these refrigerants have been coming at the national level, these refrigerants had to be approved for each and every state. And some of these states had them approved years ago. Some states, as early as 2021, they had A2L refrigerants approved and products being sold very early on. So again, for us to be having changes as late as 2024, knowing that this equipment's now already being rolled out, you may be watching this video in 2025 when 410A equipment is now going to be phased down. We're beginning the first phases of you can no longer even purchase a full 410A system anymore. You might be able to still buy components, maybe a heat pump or an air handler, but technically, if we're following the rules here, you will not be able to buy a full 410A system and install it starting January 1st, 2025. So all this stuff needs to get figured out, ironed out, and stop changing things. Set the rules, and then let's abide by those rules. And, you know, just like anything, if something needs to be amended, fine. But they've had time. And I don't know who they are, but whoever's making these decisions, they've had enough time now that these decisions could have and should have been made, in my opinion. Number 4 is one of my biggest problems with all of this is the colors of the jugs. So gone are the days of pink jugs and blue jugs and green jugs and all these different colored jugs of refrigerant. All these A2L refrigerants are this off-white, light gray color with a red stripe. And I know what, a lot of pros are saying, oh, well, you should just read the jug. And I know that, and the folks saying that are probably good heating and air technicians and know that. But what about that helper you just hired? And he's not paying attention, and he's playing a game on his phone, and he went and grabbed a jug of refrigerant, and he's now going to charge a system. I see it very easy, very possible for them to charge a system, add the wrong refrigerant to a heating and air system. And is that the end of the world? Well, we don't know. It shouldn't be, but if nothing else, it's not okay. It's not approved by the EPA for you to be putting the wrong refrigerants, non-approved refrigerant, in a system that it wasn't designed to have that refrigerant. I think that's a big problem. They had every opportunity to make one of these new jugs yellow and the other one neon green or black or very different colors on these new refrigerants that came out. You could still put a red stripe on it, but why have them all look the same? It seems a little backwards to me. Could we see that change in the future? I don't know, but it's, in my opinion, the worst thing that we've seen come out so far with these new refrigerants. And then finally, number 5 on problems that I see with these new A2L refrigerants, and that is there's more to come. There are more changes to come, more codes to be changed, and we're also being told possibly more refrigerants to come. We went from R22. I was in the trade when we went from R22 to 410, and the pressures were so much higher. And they were telling us that 410A manufacturers and different folks that were teaching in our industry, and they were basically telling us that 410A was God's gift to us, the technicians, that it was environmentally friendly. In fact, some brands would even put this logo of a green leaf on each and every tank, only to find out that they're not okay for the environment, that they have a high GWP, global warming potential, and now they're not okay. What's interesting about these new refrigerants, as we phase down 410 and we go to either R32 or 454B, these A2L refrigerants, we already are being told from the beginning that the future is going to be a lot of changes. And what that looks like, we still don't know. We're still in the midst of these changes, but that we should still be bracing for upcoming changes in the future, especially as we see other countries that always seem to be a little ahead of us in Europe and Asia start to look at other refrigerants and start to experiment with other options that are out there. So could these show us a front row seat or a snapshot of the future, if you will, in our country? And I think the answer is yes. We're going to see changes coming, more to come. And to me, that's a problem. Wouldn't it be great if we could make a good long-term decision and make a decision for something that we could use for the next century, for example? I know there's a little more to it than that, especially with technology, but wouldn't it be great if they were at least attempting to make that type of a decision? Let me know your thoughts. Do you have any concerns or problems with these new refrigerants? Love to hear about those down in the comment section. If you like this video, I think you'll like this one even more. It's where I went to Washington, D.C. to talk to some of the folks that affect some of these decisions being made at the federal level. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.